A compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
The Riddle of the Noosphere, Academician Vernadsky. The thinking shell. Changes are inevitable. Space philosophy. The kingdom of reason. There is nothing stronger than the thirst for knowledge and the power of doubt. This quest is the basis of all scientific activity. And I feel that I can die, I can burn, seeking it, but even if I won't find it, I will seek to find it no matter what, no matter how bitter, illusory and dirty it might be. Vladimir Vernadsky. He spent his whole life looking for the truth, and it might seem that he did. But it turned out that it was unnecessary, untimely, and would there be any time for it? The mind is a subtle thing. He was nurturing this idea perhaps in Moscow, but it developed here during his stay in Burabay. If he had lived in our time, perhaps he would have won more than one Nobel Prize. But he had only one, the Stalin's Prize. One of the founders of the Soviet atomic project, the creator of the science of biogeochemistry and the philosophical doctrine of the noosphere. Academician Vernadsky and the shell of rationality. Only a rational person can change the field of information, of energy, the subtle world of the organization of life, one's own, planetary, and even at the universal scale. A few words about the noosphere. This was the last word of Vernadsky. Everything was aimed to welcome them, to warm them up, as Burabay's atmosphere had favorable conditions for prolific work. Chapter 1. The Thinking Shell. We know only a small part of nature, only a small part of this incomprehensible, obscure, all-encompassing puzzle, and everything that we had no idea about we find out thanks to dreams of visionaries and learned poets. He kept a diary throughout his conscious life. Just think about it, 78 years. The last entry was made on December the 24th, 1944, 2 weeks before his death. And this one was made before he was evacuated to Burabay in July of 1941. Not only theoretically, I look forward with great calm to the noosphere. The Germans are trying to forcefully create a violent reversal of the course of history in the beginning of this scientific century. But considering the strength of both sides, I think their position is hopeless. Vladimir Vernadsky. Moscow, the Institute of Geochemistry on the Sparrow Hills. You're visiting Vladimir Ivanovich Vernadsky. But Vladimir never worked here. The building was built after his death, and the office was simply recreated with due care. During the construction, a room was planned, which according to its dimensions, the arrangement of windows and doors replicated the scientist's home office. And again, we're visiting Vernadsky, again his office, and again, carefully recreated. In this photo, Amina tried to recreate the same office we have here in Burabay. Kazakhstan, Burabay. This museum is due to efforts of one person, Amina Tursunbayeva. She dedicated her entire life to this museum. She was only 13 years old when she met Vernadsky, and all her life she kept the memory of his amazing scientist alive. We had a library where Vernadsky worked, so she ran to the library and washed the floors, and she also helped him, bringing him books. On the table there is a book. Amina Apai also brought it, the main work of the great scientist Vernadsky, the biosphere and noosphere. A large part of the world's most famous teaching was written in Burabay. The biosphere is our living shell of the Earth. It passes into a new state, transformed, spiritualized into the noosphere, where scientific thought becomes a geological force. After all, it is with the help of scientific thought that we create some instruments with which we can investigate, transform, and finally modify the surface. If the laws of nature are not violated by man, then the whole biosphere, including the anthroposphere, i.e. including all of humanity, will also receive all the resources for its harmonious existence. The very term, noosphere, the shell of reason, was not invented by Vernadsky. He did not like to invent new words. This concept took its name in the 1920s in Paris thanks to scientist Edouard Leroy. But the basis was laid by Vernadsky. Professor Leroy was fascinated by the lectures that Vladimir Ivanovich read at the Sorbonne. What began in France continued in Moscow, ended in Kazakhstan and Burabay during the evacuation. Chapter 2. Changes are inevitable. The face of the planet, the biosphere, is chemically dramatically changed by man consciously and mainly unconsciously. Mankind taken as a whole becomes a powerful geological force, and before his thought and work becomes a question of restructuring the biosphere in the interest of a free-thinking person as a whole. Vladimir Vernadsky. He was sure radical changes are inevitable. He considered the planet Earth a living organism and saw scientific thought as a planetary phenomenon. Man manages the noosphere, and the noosphere manages the planet, and hence again manages man, a very simplistic explanation. Vernadsky was inclined to some kind of mysticism and some superstition, and believed that his rocking chair helped him to better shape his scientific thoughts, right? That's right. Here it is, that very chair, at the Moscow Museum. He brought this rocking chair with him to Burabay from Moscow, and when he left, he took it back with him. The radio works poorly, reports from the front are disappointing, and only the Battle of Moscow gives hope. The first winter, there are real frosts. Indoors, it is also very cold. There are problems with electricity and water. But no one said that the Burabay resort would have the conditions of a resort. War. The Vernadsky family endured all the inconveniences with great strength. Although he is of a respectable age, he's almost 80. There are 150 scientists at the Burabay resort of worldwide repute. They assisted in the front with their scientific research. We, of course, caused great inconvenience for the local residents. The population was starving. 1 pound of flour cost 130 rubles. There's not enough bread. The resort is full of tuberculosis patients. Vladimir Vernadsky. There's not enough paper, eyes can't see well, and in general, the state of his health is not good, but he still works on, and he writes. I work very well recently. I am in a strict regime because I want to finish my book. He certainly got tired. He rested while reading. He was sitting in his armchair, a couch, or a rocking chair and looked through books, which he specially selected for resting. What kind of books? The culture of the Kievan Rus. He concentrated all his efforts on completing his work, The Chemical Structure of the Biosphere of the Earth and Its Surroundings, the book of Vernadsky's life. The third part of this book, about the noosphere, had not been finalized. At the same time, he was writing his memoirs. He dreamt of publishing a book. Experiences, he made reports, and quote, I think I feel myself much younger than young people. The terrain is excellent. The resort has more than 1,000 people in it. We live in the forest, around a mass of lakes in the granite mountain steppe. It's a wonderful place to take a walk. There was a house in which he lived near a mountain. Well, it's still there. And on this mountain, there was a gazebo once. And Vernadsky liked to sit there and breathe the fresh air. He reflected on the unity of man with nature, looking at this landscape. This was the favorite place of Vladimir. In the 40s, there was a large veranda along which he liked to walk, well, sit in the chair. And then he went down to this ladder, the remains of which are still preserved, and went to his house. His house was located there, down below.
И шел к себе домой. Его дача располагалась вот здесь, внизу.
Here at this table in Burabay, they worked together, the 37th house where Academician Vernadsky lived. Surprisingly, at the same time, an academician became one of the initiators of the Museum of Natural History in Burabay. However, the museum was not developing very well, but the work, even slowly, Vernadsky often was sick, still progressed. And the time that was spent in Burabay was a time for summarizing scientific results. Chapter 3. Space Philosophy. Real human life is created only by the efforts of personality. Only continuous efforts, creative attitude of the individual to the world gives a shade of real life to our earthly existence. In December 1942, he wrote in his diary, "I'm preparing for the departure from life. No fear, the disintegration into atoms and molecules." But his wife died first, on February the 3rd, 1943. Natalia Egorovna is buried in our local cemetery. It's very painful to watch Vladimir. He's terribly shocked. He didn't say anything about his work. He responded that he's not a machine and could not live without moral support. We were very much afraid for his health, and he nevertheless took up his job and gives us hope that he will cope with the terrible loss. From a letter by Anna Shakovskoy. He finished his work on symmetry. He wrote the dedication to his wife. He lost a lot of weight. On the occasion of his 80th birthday in March of 1943, he received the Stalin Prize, 200,000 rubles. Half of it he gave to the needs of the front. The rest was given to his relatives, to those who needed the money. All the remaining money he gave to the needy and dying from malnutrition and to families of his friends, colleagues, and relatives. Judging by the diary entries, Vernadsky really believed in victory and the undeniable truth of socialism, but the truth is, nevertheless, inexorable. And some of the data in his scientific system did not fit. In July of 1943, he prepared an article on the noosphere, but printed it only in 1944 in a specialized journal. The noosphere was not accepted by the scientific community. Then it was considered a whim of a venerable scholar. He sent his work, a few words about the noosphere, to Joseph Stalin himself. He wanted to get Stalin's opinion on the work, but there was no answer. However, you never know what is good. Maybe it's for the best that there was no answer. Vernadsky came back to Moscow in August of 1943. Epilogue, the Kingdom of Reason. Here we have a new mystery. How can mere thought change material processes? This question has not been scientifically resolved. Vladimir Vernadsky. A few words about the noosphere. The thinking shell of the planet, formed by human consciousness, the harmonious joint evolution of man and nature together. Recently, this harmony is being violated more and more often. If we do not treat nature as something important, I don't know how to make sure that people understand that nature is an intelligent being that has nurtured us, which gave us the opportunity to live, which will give us the opportunity to continue to live in the future. But we treat it so rigidly with absolute indifference.
Но мы относимся к нему вот так безразлично, так жестко, черство.
Thanks to the notion of the noosphere, I look to the future extremely optimistically, but the realm of my ideas is ahead, Vernadsky said. Even now, much of his notions of the noosphere are not yet fully studied by science. A person disappears quickly, the love of others fades away in a short time, but the memory remains for a longer period of time. Often what stays after a person dies for an extremely long time are his thoughts and the impact of his work on our everyday lives, according to Vernadsky.
Academic Vernadsky.